But tonight we are in Matthew 14 and 15. So just let me know when y'all are there.
I'm here.
Alrighty.
Yep, all good here. Yep.
Turn. We'll do that. And we'll do this. There we go. Now everybody can see me if they want to. Alright. Starting off with 14. The death of John the Baptist. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people, because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." And the king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took the body away and buried it, and they went and told Jesus. All right. So, yeah, suboptimal for John. But yeah, we talked about John the Baptist and his ministry. I think it's been the past couple weeks. So now, apparently, he was thrown in prison because everyone was saying that he's a prophet, or he was thrown in prison because people were he was powerful, and the king Herod wanted to essentially sleep with or marry John the Baptist's brother's wife, and John was like, "Hey, man, that's not good. Like, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that." So he just threw him in prison anyway. But he didn't actually kill him or anything because he was so worried about him and the power that the people said he had, because he was a prophet essentially. So King, yeah, he basically is tricked. Not even tricked. It's just the daughter of the woman that he wants to sleep with apparently wants to sleep with him too, and has her daughter go dance for him, and he's impressed. He's like, "I'll give you whatever you want." And then it's to basically kill John the Baptist so they can sleep together and all that. So that's how John the Baptist dies there. But it's also important that King Herod, and this is a different King Herod from like when Jesus was born. This is King Herod, like Junior. I think this is his son. Um, he actually believes that Jesus is the reincarnated or just reborn John the Baptist, because he hears of all these powers and all of these gifts that Jesus has, all these miracles that he's performing. He's convinced that John the Baptist has rose from the grave, essentially. Yep. Does that make sense for the first bit there?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Jesus feeds the 5,000. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away into the villages and buy food for them." Yeah, interesting sentence structure. "Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We only have 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up into heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. They took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces left over, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So this is one of the most famous miracles that Jesus performs, feeding the 5,000. So out of 5 loaves and 2 fish. So the beginning of the story, Jesus hears that John's killed, hears how he's killed, and he retreats to the boat to mourn, essentially, because he's sad because he was friends with John the Baptist, and he realized what happened to him. So the people were actually still following from the last chapter. So they just sat on the shore and waited until he was done. And then he comes back and he's like, oh, okay, well, you guys are really fans of me. So he started showing compassion for them and healing them. So the day's end comes. The disciples want him to send away all the people because they're hungry and to go get rest. And Jesus says, like, no, we'll feed them here. Takes up all the food that they have, which is 5 loaves and 2 fish, which is not a lot. But then he performed another miracle and broke the bread into pieces and the fish into pieces and gave them to everybody. And they actually had extra left over. So it's one of the most famous miracles in the Bible there. Does anybody have any questions on that?
All good.
Sweet. All right, verse 22. Jesus walks on water. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." And then I'm going to read this last little part here. Jesus heals the sick in Gennesaret. And when they had crossed over, they came to the land Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent around to all that region and brought to him all who were sick, and implored him that they might only touch the fringe of his garment. And as many as touched it were made well. So another very famous miracle. They're right back to back here. So after feeding the 5,000, Jesus sends his disciples to the other side of the sea in a boat. He then dismisses the crowds and goes up on the mountain to pray. So by the time he finishes praying, it's late in the night. The boat's like well away from the shore. So Jesus is like, I guess I'll just walk. Walks out on the open water, and then everybody thinks that he's a ghost. Because, I mean, walking on water is impossible as far as they know. So Jesus calls to them and calms them down. And then Peter, still doubting, says, "If it's truly you, then make it to where I can walk basically out to you." So Jesus says to do so, and Peter begins to walk to him on water. So part of the way there, Peter begins to fear the wind and the waves. I guess he's looking around at like what he's doing. He's like, "Oh, this is not good. This is not normal." So he begins to fear, and then he begins to sink. So he calls out, and Jesus saves him. And then Jesus is like, "Why did you start to doubt?" So this is an amazing parallel for our lives, because we go through life, we pray about things constantly, or at least some of us do. We experience good times, times of joy, triumph, happiness. But as soon as the first little minor inconvenience happens, we're like, "Come on, God, like what's going on? Like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you punishing me? I thought I was doing good. I thought I was reading my Bible. I thought I was going to church. I thought I was praying, all that kind of stuff. Like, what's going on? So it's very similar to Peter. He's like literally walking on water, performing a miracle, and he looks around at his situation and then begins to doubt. So I mean, I'm the same exact way. I mean, it takes very little for me to start doubting, for me to start questioning things and just feeling uneasy about a situation, instead of just putting my faith in God. Um, so it's just like we pray that something works out in God's will. It works out. We thank God. And then as soon as the next little inconvenience happens, we just start pointing the finger. So it's a really good reminder, that God is in complete control, that His will be done, and that, I mean, He's got our best interest at the very end of the day, um, in mind, and that we'll be taken care of. I mean, no matter what, because we're Christians. So it's just one of those things we need to remember. It's just hold fast to Jesus and the words of the Bible and trust that He's in control, no matter what the situation around us looks like, no matter what this current circumstance that we're in looks like. We need to remember that He's in control and to trust and have faith in Him. Anybody have any questions there? All right. So next we're going to chapter 15, Traditions and Commandments. Then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat. He answered them, and why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God commanded, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles his father and mother must surely die. But you say, if anyone tells his father or his mother, what you would have gained from me is given to God, he need not honor his father. So for the sake of your tradition you have made void the word of God, you hypocrites. Well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. All right, and then, we're gonna read this next part. What defiles a person? And he called the people to him and said to them, hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person. Then the disciples came to him and said, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? He answered, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. Let them alone. They are blind guides, and if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. But Peter said to him, explain the parable to us. And he said, are you also still without understanding? Do you not see whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone. So, the Pharisees are just constantly trying to find anything that they can possibly put their hands on or point to discredit Jesus or to claim that he's blaspheming. So Jesus speaks to the Pharisees again because they're coming to him with their self-contradictions, I guess. They're accusing him of breaking a tradition, a man-made tradition, but Jesus then accuses them of breaking a commandment of God, just for the sake of their tradition. So it's a very important distinction. Traditions are made by man, commandments, and then doctrine is made by the Bible. And I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. So what the Pharisees were doing was, it was common that instead of helping your parents, say your parents were really old and you didn't want to have to put up with them, you didn't want to have to help them in their old age, you didn't want to have to give them resources or money or time or whatever it was, that you could say, oh, well, my money, my time, my resources are actually dedicated to God and the church. So technically, God and the church comes before my parents. So sorry, mom and dad, you can't have it because it's the churches and all this stuff is for God. Uh, so Jesus is like, that's absolutely absurd. You're just basically trying to find little plot holes or just little holes, little loopholes in doctrine to get out of doing something you don't want to do, and that you should honor the spirit of the commandment and not just the by the actual letter. So the Ten Commandments doctrine, the Bible is not something that you can gamify to try to get out of or get around. So it's something that I think of a lot when you hear about Mormons and like soaking. It's like no, that's not. I although it's technically on paper like you're not doing anything wrong. It's like it's the spirit of it is still to sin in that you are sinning. So it's 100% wrong. Like no matter who said it wasn't, it's still sex outside of marriage, whether you're the one moving or somebody's underneath the bed moving you. Like that's absolutely insane. So that's just something that comes to my mind when I think about trying to gamify the Bible. So it's just you can't just point out the technicalities and be like, well, technically I'm not breaking the commandment, so I'm fine. It's like if you ever find yourself thinking like, oh, well, it's technically not a sin, it's a sin, most likely. Um, so that's something I have to remind myself of because I mean I'll fall into that trap. I'm like, well, that's not really that bad. And then if you're having to tell yourself that, it usually is that bad. Um, so Jesus then refers back to the prophecy from Isaiah speaking of the Pharisees and other hypocrites, basically saying that their hearts hold their true intentions and their hearts are clearly unclean. So the intent of your actions also matters. And he basically says that they're the blind leading the blind, which is where that saying comes from. It's the Bible. I didn't know that. But yeah, so if you're following a blind person and you're blind yourself, I mean, you guys aren't getting where you want to go. That's for sure. Um, does that anybody have any questions about that first part?
I do not.
Sweet. All right, now we're going to jump to verse 21. The faith of a Canaanite woman. And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, send her away, for she is crying out after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. She said, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. And her daughter was healed instantly. All right. So, Jesus is approached by a Gentile woman, so a non-Jew, about her daughter being oppressed or possessed by a demon. She asks for help. Jesus essentially says, like, hey, it says in the Old Testament, like, I'm here to save the people of Israel, not specifically everybody or the Gentiles. We'll cover that in a second. She responds and asks again for help, but he says, like, hey, I shouldn't be giving away. I'm promised to come help the Israelites. I shouldn't be giving away what I should be doing for them to somebody that it's not promised that I'm coming to. I shouldn't give something away that's not, give something that's rightfully somebody else's to a different person. So she responds saying that essentially what she's saying here with the analogy is, and what Jesus is saying is that just he has near infinite power. I mean, or just infinite power. And even the smallest amount would be able to heal her daughter. So Jesus is actually impressed at her faith and heals her daughter on the spot. So Jesus says, yeah, the whole like give something to somebody that's not do it. is the part where he says, let's see. It is not right to take the children's bread, so essentially what I'm supposed to be giving to Israel, and throw it to the dogs, meaning the Gentiles. I don't think he's actually calling Gentiles dogs. It's just an analogy. It's like I shouldn't be giving, like the children are much more important to feed than the dogs. That's what he's saying. It's like Israel's number one, Gentiles are number two. So, and then she's saying like, hey, I don't need all the bread. I don't need everything you're giving the Israelites. Just give me anything. Give me the smallest amount, and I know that you have the immense power that she'll be healed, regardless of how much you actually give me. So, Jesus is impressed with her show of faith, with her just the words that she says. So he actually says like, it is done. It will be so, and heals her daughter. So I believe that he says all these things. Essentially, the part where he says, let's see, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I think it's one. It's to fulfill the promise, the prophecy. Because I don't know if up until this point he's actually said like, I have come to save the house of Israel. But Old Testament predicts that, or not predicts that, but prophesies that he will come to save the house of Israel. So he's basically doubling down and saying, yep, I'm that guy. I'm here to save the house of Israel. And then also, I think he's testing her faith. I think he's saying like, hey, like technically, it's funny because he just talked about technicalities before that, but I think he was just testing her faith, seeing if she truly believed that he had the power to heal, or if she thought that if she was just buying into like the hype or the just all the notoriety he was getting. So she clearly passed and had plenty of faith, so her daughter was healed. Does anybody have any questions on that? Sweet. And then we're jumping to verse 29. I think, yeah, let's see. Yeah. So we're gonna basically finish out 15 here. Jesus heals many. Jesus went on from there and walked beside the Sea of Galilee. And he went up on the mountain and sat down there. And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them. So that the crowd wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they glorified the God of Israel. Jesus feeds the 4,000. Then Jesus called his disciples to him, and said, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I am unwilling to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. And the disciples said to him, Where are we going to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd? And Jesus said to them, How many loaves do you have? They said 7, and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. So, the crowds continue to follow him. They apparently it's gotten to a point where it's like 4,000 people again, or 5,000 before, 4,000 now. So he's healed them all, and he wants to send them away, but he didn't want to send them away hungry. So he ends up breaking up in a very small amount of food again and feeding them. So it's just funny that these two instances of very similar miracles are so close together, both in the Bible and time. I mean, it's in the same, within one chapter of each other. And that's not something that like I knew was that close. Like I think I knew, I was pretty sure I knew that it happened twice. I don't think I knew it was like within a week of each other or however long the time gap is here. So that's cool. But it's very similar, I mean, to the first story. He breaks up a very small amount of fish and loaves into more than he started with. So it's yet another miracle that he performs. And I did notice, again, I forgot to mention it the first time, but it says those who ate were 4,000 men besides women and children. So it says the same thing in the first miracle, but it's 5,000. So what that means is it's probably more like, I don't know, 8 to 12,000 for both of them, just because I mean most men would have a woman with them, if not, or maybe not most, but like 50%. Um, so I mean it's a ton of people, and then you've got children on top of that. So I mean it is an ignorant amount of people. I mean, to be fair, it could be 200 people and it would still be impressive because he doesn't have enough food for 200 people, let alone 4,000, 5,000, or 10,000. So it's all equally as crazy of a miracle that he does that. Um, but yeah, I thought that was cool that it's actually right back to back, the two miracles of feeding a giant group of people. But yeah, so that concludes 14 and 15. Does anybody have any questions on today's reading?
No, I'm all good.
Everything makes sense for everybody?
Yeah, I missed the beginning part. So are you gonna upload this?
Yeah, yeah.
Bet.
Yes, sir. I don't know. When did you join in?
He joined like 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, I joined at 8:03.
Oh, yeah, you didn't miss hardly anything then. We
Alright,
just read 14 and 15. Did you hear the feed the 5,000 part
Yes,
the first
I
time?
was there for that. Yes.
Were you there for Death of John the Baptist?
Yes.
Then you didn't miss anything.
Awesome.
You missed the prelude, the intro.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing. I mean, we didn't talk about anything substantial, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, pretty good. Yeah, this week is just more stories. I mean, I'm not a pastor, but I'm sure a pastor could spend 5 hours talking about one of these tiny like instances. But I like talking on things that come up to me, that stick out to me, whenever I'm reading through, and then I like basically conveying it to you guys in a way that's easy to understand, because if I do that, then that means I understand it. So that's kind of what I did. What I did here. But does anybody have any specific prayer requests?
Nothing for me.
Yeah.
Life's good, man.
Sweet. All right, we'll pray for Kevin's. Kevin, you haven't had that interview yet, have you?
No, it's gonna be next week, I think.
Okay, cool. We'll pray for that. Hopefully that goes well. And I heard Mark talking on the phone about it today, so I don't know who he was talking to, and I didn't really hear much info about it. I just heard that he was talking about it because I heard your name and my name. So pretty sweet.
Holden's wife's Bailey. Her mom's in the ICU right now.
Jeez.
So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I know she's struggling in the ICU.
You don't know what happened?
No, I don't.
Jeez. You said Bailey's her name, right?
Yeah, Bailey.
Bailey's mom.
Bailey's mom.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we'll definitely pray for that. But yeah, if we don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the wonderful week that we've had so far. I pray that each and everybody was able to get something from the passages today. Lord, I pray that you helped me explain it as good as I can. And Lord, I pray that we would just all have a good rest of the week and end of the weekend, Lord. I pray that we would just thank you for everybody that was able to come tonight to participate, and even those that watch after everything's over. Lord, I pray for Kevin. He's got a big job interview coming up. I pray that your will be done and that he's able to secure the job if that's what's meant to happen, Lord. And I pray that Nardine's able to find another job as well, somewhere that she's able to be happy and that appreciates her. And Lord, I pray for Bailey's mom. She's in the ICU. We don't know what's going on entirely, but I pray that you just put your hand on her, be with her, and pray that she has a safe recovery and a healthy recovery with whatever's going on, Lord. And I pray that we just, again, have a good rest of the week. And I pray that you would just watch over all of us as we go about our day-to-day lives. In your heavenly name I pray. Amen.